me here on Enlightened World Network. As you may know, this is a brand new live stream that I'm doing every day, hence the title, A Course in Miracles 365, for students, practitioners, and anyone that's curious about this wonderful, and for me, a foundational spiritual text. I started this live stream less than a week ago. In fact, this is day number 6 overall. And I just want to point out some housekeeping components to this. I intend to go through a portion of A Course in Miracles called the Workbook for Students. You may be familiar with that. And I intend to start that on Monday, this coming Monday, February 1st. So if you have a copy of A Course in Miracles, you may want to get that and follow along. And it doesn't matter if you follow me lesson for lesson. This live stream will be short. It's going to be all over Enlightened World Network's social media, including this Facebook page, the YouTube channel. So you can catch up if you miss the live. It will be at different times for right now, every day. We're jumping around a little bit, and we'll catch as many of you as we possibly can live. So I welcome your comments. Thank you so much for all who have tuned in so far. I really appreciate it. And if I don't catch your comments here during the live stream, I will absolutely answer them as soon as I can afterwards. So I do welcome this because A Course in Miracles is all about experience, and it's about spiritual inquiry. And it's inquiry and practice. So to put these ideas, the Course is a thought system. It is something that should generate questions. Because it's experiential, it should generate questions. It's not all about theory. Now, there are some terms that come up that I want to talk about, and I've been talking about some of them this week because it does use language that is not used the same way in our ordinary daily speech. So we'll talk about that at length, but to preview the workbook for you, the workbook for students comprises 365 lessons. So if one wanted to, one could start, say, on the 1st of February, do 365 consecutive lessons, one a day. And the idea is in one calendar year, you could go through that workbook. That is absolutely not required that you do it that way. And I will say more about this in tomorrow's live stream before we get going. But I hope that this practice and study brings up a lot of questions for you. I invite them. That's what I'm here to do, is to help you and answer your questions. And I want to share my experience along the way. Starting right now, today. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about forgiveness, which is one of the foundational principles of A Course in Miracles, as it is any spiritual path. It really is. It's foundational. However, it's misunderstood in our common daily lives. Why? Because people often forgive with a string attached. They forgive with a notion of keeping some of their hurt. Think of one of your parents, right? And maybe just maybe, hopefully, you had classic examples as a child of parents that were truly loving, that never held out any strings, that never gave with strings attached, that never forgave with strings attached. Maybe that was you, wasn't me. And I'll talk more about that in some detail in just a couple of minutes here. But that's a good example. So let's say your mother would used to say, okay, I forgive you for doing whatever it is that you did. I forgive you, but don't ever do that again. Or if I ever catch you in your sister's room again, and whatever the threat was, to spank you, to whip you, to cancel your birthday, right? Whatever that threat may have been, that's forgiveness. That's not true forgiveness. We all can feel that. It's forgiveness with a string attached. And that's often in the world what passes for forgiveness. Now, that is not forgiveness as A Course in Miracles talks about it. Course in Miracles talks about it as overlooking of error. What error? The error of separation, which is fundamentally an error. It's very interesting. We call it sin sometimes, original sin. That's a term that gets thrown about. You may have had lots of direct exposure to that terminology. Really, there's no such thing. Why? God has no ego to be offended. Spirit has no ego, no sense of separation. So, in fact, it cannot, by definition, be offended. So there is no sin. If you don't believe it, that's okay. Right? I know that many of us were raised in a tradition that emphasized that heavily. I was raised in a couple of fairly fundamentalist Christian traditions, including a Southern Baptist church. So you can bet that sin was really, really, I'm just laughing thinking about it, really prominent, big time. There is no such thing. And if that hits you in an odd sort of way, I just invite you to sit with it as anything that I may say, anything that you may hear either on this network or anywhere else in spirituality. We're speaking from our experience. So God has no ego to be offended. All right. So when people in the world, family members, friends, our brothers, sisters, so-called offend us, what's really going on there? Now, with forgiveness, here's what's really happening, according to the thought system of A Course in Miracles, is that we're overlooking the error of separation. If we did not feel like we were separated, we wouldn't be offended by someone else's behavior. Because as the Course teaches, and we'll talk about, everything is either an act of love or it's a call for love. Right? It's either an act of love or it's a call for it. Someone is acting out, they want love. Right? When we look at a small child that's acting out, we think, oh, they need attention. They're calling out for love, quite honestly. And then why is it so easy for us to see that in connection with children, yet it's not easy for us at all to see that in connection with ourselves as adults? Forgiveness essentially overlooks the error of separation. So what does that look like in practice? Let me give you a personal example of what it's like to really deeply, deeply forgive somebody. And I'll make it quick because this is a short live stream. Yet all right, EWN people, I'm saying this right now. I'll be back here on this network with a lot more detailed conversation about forgiveness and my own personal experience, because I'll keep it brief today. My mother was an alcoholic. She passed away in May of 2016. But prior to that time, you could characterize our relationship as difficult. That is the PG-13 version of it. And we often had heated disagreements. We fundamentally and philosophically disagreed about so much in life. And well, she was an alcoholic. Not every alcoholic acts out the same way, as we know. Some people, when they drink, are very, very loving. Actually, they're silly or they just go to sleep, and others are flat mean. And unfortunately, my mother struggled with that and fell into the mean category. So over the years, over many years, we're talking decades, so many things were said and passed back and forth that it was very difficult for me as an adult. It was honestly, very difficult for me as an adult, because the behavior, which was massive guilt trips, F-bomb list, tirades, things that I'm not going to say here on this network, You can imagine it because you may have experienced some of this yourself. So, what does forgiveness, true forgiveness, look like? Well, after finding A Course in Miracles, I like to say it found me in 2013. After that, things really fundamentally began to change for me in my relationship with my mother because I took things to heart. The forgiveness piece of the Course I took to heart and put it into practice and really began to consider what it truly means to forgive. Now, what was the effect of that? Liberation, emotional and psychological liberation. Jesus says in the Course, a tranquil mind is not a small gift. I'll say that again because I fully, completely, wholeheartedly agree with that. A tranquil mind is not a small gift, it's huge. So over time, I was able to forgive her for a lifetime's worth of bad behavior. A deep level, forgive. Why? Because she was suffering and calling out for love, quite basically. So I will share with you that along with that forgiveness did not mean a return to the status quo. It meant some very precise and very strictly enforced personal boundaries. That's not an issue at all. People often think that if you forgive someone or something, that you have to allow everything to go back to the way it was. Not so. Not so. I set very healthy and very firm, very adult boundaries with my own mother. And she and I lived under a continued strained relationship for the last 2 years of her life. However, I was emotionally, psychologically freed. Forgiveness does that. It lightens. It absolutely 100% lightens. And if you have done this to some degree, any degree in your life, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. It lightens you, and that tranquility, that psychological, that spiritual, emotional liberation is absolutely huge. What happens? You become a different person. Will you need to keep some adult boundaries in place? Yes, depending on the situation, you may. And I know that a number of us as human beings definitely struggle with that component. However, it's doable. Forgiveness liberates. Now, if you can't start, I often get this from people that, well, I can't really start with that. I mean, that seems like a wonderful example that you just gave with your mom, but I can't start with that. I'm just not there yet. That's okay. Right? We all are where we are, and we have to start where we are in any spiritual path. We are what we're bringing to the table right now in the present moment, the sum total of all of our experiences and our learning. That's what we've got. So if all you find that you can do is forgive the dog for peeing on the carpet, for example, start there. If you are able to forgive yourself for forgetting to buy eggs at the grocery store, do that. Right? These are just examples, and they may seem small. They may seem really trivial to you in comparison to forgiving an alcoholic mother or an abusive ex-partner, ex-spouse, something like that. But we can do what we're capable of doing. We can only do, right, what we're capable of doing in a given moment. So if that means starting with small acts, start with small acts. Why? All we have is the present moment. All we have is the present moment. We make a decision in the present moment. When we forgive, we're choosing love, which is what we're here to do. All of us, all the time, choosing love. One act of forgiveness will feel good. It will feel liberating, and it will lead to another and another and another until it becomes a stream, a flow, like a river moving downhill. Definitely. That is what forgiveness is like. That is why it's so foundational to A Course in Miracles. And we will spend quite a bit more time on this. Once we start the workbook will cover it in some detail. When we get to the text after that, the text will cover it in some detail. The manual for teachers covers it in some detail. So there are always ways that you can find out more, but the best way is by practice. That is always the best thing. Practice in your daily life. So tomorrow I will be here at a different time here at 7 p.m. Eastern time, tomorrow evening for those of you on the East Coast. So 4 o'clock Pacific. Be here at a different time tomorrow. I'll just preview this. Tomorrow we'll be covering some of the basics of a workbook for students of A Course in Miracles so we can launch into that on Monday. And I'll talk more about forgiveness too, because there's a lot more for us to say. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I very much appreciate all of your time. And if you catch this later, please type in comments, questions. I'm here to answer them as best I can. All right. Everybody have a great rest of your day. And thank you